Okay, I know everyone is still working their way back in, but we want to get started with this next section, which is entitled From Internship to Leadership, and I want to welcome everybody again. My name is Joe Roman with the Greater Cleveland Partnership, which is our Chamber of Commerce here in the Metro Cleveland area. Again, I want to thank CSU and Dr. Berkman for hosting us today. I think this will be a fun session because my guess is many of you could be up here. We only could fit, well, we could have fit two more, I guess, or three more. But many of you, I think, could share experiences with the whole group about whether you called it a formal internship when you started your career or you didn't. I think some of the things we'll be talking about probably will touch on a lot of your background. I did want to go back just for a second to a comment I made at the beginning about some of the work that Richie Paparian is doing here at CSU around the way Cleveland is gaining in terms of attracting young professionals back to Cleveland. I didn't comment that his research, which I know he'll talk about in depth later, ranks Cleveland now as being tied with Miami and Seattle in terms of the rates at which we're attracting our young people back to Cleveland. And it made me think the other day that I guess that means now bringing your talents back to Cleveland or South Beach are about at the same level. So I'd like to remind LeBron about that maybe the next time. Anyway, I'm really lucky to have Jeff Melbassa here today from Spiro Smith. You can read about his background on our website. We'd rather spend more time talking to you than talking about ourselves. And Andrew Miller, who is Senior VP of Strategy and Business Analytics at the Cleveland Indians. We thought about getting an intern, that maybe pitched or something, but we decided Andrew would probably be more relevant to the group. So even though the Browns are talking these days about bringing analytics to the football field, this guy's been doing it for a long time at the Cleveland Indians. So thank you both for coming.
Thanks for having us.
What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to have each of these gentlemen talk a little bit about their backgrounds and how they started, how they found their first internship, whether or not that was the only internship, how it led to sort of their career today, and maybe take 2 or 3 minutes just to give everybody an introductory feel for where you're coming from.
Sure.
Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, so as Joe said, my bio's on the website, so I'll try not to bore everybody with every detail, but I grew up in Southern California, played baseball in college at Berkeley, and always wanted to work in sports. I realized pretty quickly, although Joe said he was looking for a pitcher, I was a pitcher. I was not a very good pitcher in college. And so I realized very quickly that my job would be most likely, at a desk in a front office if I was going to work in baseball. So I started looking for a number of different internships. I had probably 5 or 6 internships in college and really tried to balance things that, in the Bay Area, technology, finance, and sports to see if there was something out there I would enjoy. I graduated, went into finance, did about 7 years of investment banking and venture capital, went through the dot-com boom and bust, busted, went to grad school, and did a JD MBA at Northwestern. And that was really where things kept coming back to baseball, and I networked quite a bit, for about 12 months, talked to anybody in the industry who would talk to me, tried to understand where do they come from, what do they do, and what things would help me, and ended up being given very good advice to try and get in touch with Chris Antonetti, who at the time was our assistant general manager, now is our president of baseball operations. And a week later we talked, and a month later I had an internship here at the Indians. So since then I've done a mix of baseball operations, so player contracts, trade, salary arbitration, and business operations. Right now I oversee strategy and business analytics, meaning anything from predictive modeling on attendance and different things like our ballpark renovations, to hiring, which we actually believe is one of the most strategic things we do. So I'm happy to be here and look forward to talking about that more.
Wow, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm a less successful Andrew Miller. I was a marginal baseball player. I went to Boston College originally to play baseball, and they said, you're not good enough. I went to Tufts University to play baseball. I had some shoulder operations, but essentially they told me you're not good enough. Maybe I didn't have as many internships as I should have because I didn't end up in baseball at all, despite the fact that I love baseball and I'm a huge baseball fan. I, just as Dr. Ferguson was talking, I was a benefactor of just some tremendous opportunities. My parents were not of substantial means. I grew up in Cleveland, was lucky enough, though, to end up at a high school and at a junior high that had a ton of opportunities around it. I went to university school here in Cleveland, then ended up at Boston College through academics, baseball, et cetera, and just really opened my eyes to the world. I never thought I would leave Cleveland, Ohio, had no anticipation of going anywhere else. Long story short, I end up in Boston, and I'm assuming I'm going to be a teacher and a coach, really going into this is really into my senior year, really, of college. That was my plan. That was what I was going to do, and I was really excited about it. I had an individual here, Bob Smith, who's from Cleveland, runs Spiro Smith Investment Advisors, asked me if I was interested in an internship in investments. And I said that would be outstanding. The problem was most of the internships I looked at didn't pay, and I needed money. I needed to make money in the summer. Bob said, well, come in and interview. Let's find out. Long story short, I come in and interview, and they end up offering me a job at the end of the internship. Even at that point, I didn't have any anticipation that I was going to move back to Cleveland or even really go into investments. As the year kind of rolled through, because of that internship, my eyes opened up to kind of the, I would say, investment banking, economics kind of universe of opportunities that were available to somebody kind of lucky enough to be at the right school at the right time. I had all kind of job opportunities along the East Coast. I decided to move back to Cleveland, basically to save money. I was hoping to marry my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. So it was relatively successful. But anyways, some of this was successful. But shortening things up a little bit, I ended up coming back here really because of the internship and because of the opportunity I saw there. And I knew no matter what, it was a good kind of launching point. I knew economically it was a good launching point. I knew exposure-wise it was a good launching point. And I knew it was very transferable. But I would never have realized how transferable it was without that initial internship and without, frankly, a lot of other exposures that happened really fortunately in about a year and a half there at the end of college. So I'm very much a benefactor of internships. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Talk a little bit about, and maybe before we do that, I was happy to accept trying to moderate this panel because I actually can share experiences. These are the young guys. I'm an old guy here who started with an internship. I actually got a first internship in college in Washington. Worked for a congressman. Anybody here still remembers Congressman Ron Model? By any chance? Ron was my mentor in Congress, and I worked there and went on to become a lobbyist. And I thought it was a good word, not a dirty word, so I've enjoyed it ever since. But what was interesting back in those days, Carol remembers, those were the good old days in Washington, where, the crab legs were out, and the lobster tails were out, and nobody cared about who paid for it. And I remember one time going to a party, because didn't have any money to eat. We got paid, we spent it for rent. I remember going to a party once on the Hill, and my particular congressman didn't go to a lot of parties, and his name tag was still, what the heck, I took his name tag, put it on. I had the best night that night. It was tremendous. So it was from internship to leadership all in about a half hour. Could you talk a little bit about sort of how internships may be used at your current place of business?
Sure. So we annually, typically a couple times a year, we'll have an internship. So we'll have one intern or two in the summer, and then sometimes over the winter break, we'll take on an additional intern. We are fortunate. We're only a business of 15, 16 people, but because of the work that we do, which is investment advisory work, there's all kinds of things that we can have an intern do. They can answer phones, they can do Excel spreadsheets, they can learn about investments, financial planning, et cetera. So there's a broad breadth of work that can be done. And so we're fortunate. It's easy, even for our size, to take on 3-4 interns a year. And we think it's really beneficial. Actually, a number of our kind of current and staff and employees are former interns with the firm. So it's been a pretty good pipeline for us finding talent. And also, even if it's not them specifically who comes to us, through them, meeting other students that might be a good applicant has been pretty beneficial for us. So it's been great for our business. It's also, just everybody in here, I think, recognizes this, but youth matters. I just laugh I think I've been at Spiro Smith, I think it's, 14 years it is now, you grow ancient in a hurry, especially when it comes to technology. And so having young people come in and just ask questions is phenomenally beneficial. So that's the main reason for us. It's self-serving. We want new talent, and you want people to challenge you on the technology and kind of the process side of things. Interns are great for that.
So our business is obviously baseball, and we're trying to win games, win the World Series. So we do a lot of our hiring of players. So we're scouring the earth, Venezuela, the Dominican, Asia, high schools, colleges for players, and that's where our talent pipeline is on the field. We've made a strategic choice that says basically we don't have the resources of some of the other teams, and our league is dependent on local sources of revenue. So we need to figure out where can we create other competitive advantages for ourselves so that we can compete and win with teams with more resources. One of the ways we've done that over the last couple of decades is through hiring of people, through hiring of interns, through hiring across all of our business departments and baseball departments. And when Joe mentioned Paul DePodesta, who just came back to the Browns, it goes all the way back. Paul was here as an intern in the 90s, and we have 2 decades worth of people who are executive leaders across baseball and now across other sports who started out here as interns, primarily because John Hart and Mark Shapiro and now Chris Antonetti have a very different view of interns than other people in the industry. They view interns as not people there to file or do manual work or get coffee or order lunch. They're hiring the next generation of leaders for our organization. And it starts with the hiring process. It starts with identifying people who could be that talent moving forward. And then it moves to empowering those people to do critical work that complements our business to make us better. So it starts decades ago, and we're trying to go out and continue that today.
You both describe sort of a culture of internships where you're from. How do you maintain that? I mean, Bob Smith, Paul Dolan, others within, how do you maintain that culture within the organization? Because it's great to do it one year, but what I'm hearing from both of you is it's actually part of your business model almost, and maybe that's something we could help some of the folks out here with. Yeah,
so culture, especially as it relates to our people, is passed down. It's passed down from person to person and generation to generation. And I think we heard that earlier in some of the speeches. But when we bring people in, we then try and explain to them, here's how we do things, and here's what we're looking for when you go out and hire the next person. And we're involved in that. We're a relatively small organization. We're bigger than 15 people, but we're close to about 200 people, kind of full-time, not counting players and people working in the ballpark day in and day out. So that's not a huge organization by big corporate standards. So we are small, and we try and make it so that people understand what we're looking for and what we're trying to do as we move forward. And it really does come down to the belief that we're working towards something common as a group, and that we're empowering the people we bring in, so that people feel like they're contributing as soon as they get there.
I think Andrew said it all there. I think it is I think one is having some success with it. So if you have an intern that goes well, I mean, obviously that's kind of an experience, it felt good, let's do more of that, right? So I think there's a little bit of that involved with it that's certainly special. And I think the other aspect of it is just, there's a humility that comes with being the benefactor of an experience like that, right? And I don't think you ever forget that. And so I think most likely, if you have an intern that's successful in the business, they're going to want to provide that for somebody else. And so I just think when you're hiring that intern, don't forget, you're giving somebody the opportunity to have a good experience and then pay that forward. I think that is a cultural thing that I think sounds like both organizations feel pretty strongly about.
At our shop, we have 8 to 10 internships every year, and we've found it to be a great experience. In fact, I think most of the video that we've been seeing in front of each session was actually done by our interns last summer. But one of the things I hear from many of our members is that, internships, of course we would love to have them. We see the value, but boy, it's a lot of work. In fact, we hear it at our office. How am I going to, I got this job to do. Now I've got an intern. How am I going to make sure, and I actually think it's a responsibility feeling in most people's minds. How do I make sure that I'm challenging, that to my intern, that they like what they're doing, that they're learning? I'm curious, think back, how structured were your first internships? Did you find yourself going, what the heck am I doing here some days? Or just talk a little bit about, because I think some people are reluctant to start internships because they don't know if they're going to be instantly good at it from their end of the bargain. So just talk a little bit about sort of how structured it was when you started.
I mean, mine was not structured at all. I probably spent the first month like just begging people for anything to do. And so it wasn't structured, but because of where I was, I mean, you had access to kind of all these softwares and pieces of information that I otherwise wouldn't have had. So I spent the whole day kind of researching. I mean, there's only so much internet surfing I could do. I mean, you would just go and research things that were related to the field. You'd ask questions. So it was, I mean, for me, kind of part of that lack of structure was outstanding. It was great. It actually gave me a great opportunity to learn more about the business. So very unstructured. I wouldn't let that be a reason not to have an intern. So yeah, unstructured for sure.
So looking back at my internship with the Indians, it was a mix. I had some responsibilities I had to get done every morning, and then I had some longer-term research projects I needed to get done by the end of the summer. So I usually use the morning to get things done that I needed to get done, and then use the afternoon for doing research, and then use the evening for baseball games. So there's quite a bit of time in there to learn different things. We've moved quite a bit in different directions in terms of structure. We've started 2 entry-level development programs in the last 5 years, and they've somewhat modeled our internship program. One of them is slightly more structured than the other. It really depends on what skills we believe are important for someone to be successful in that job moving forward, and whether it's more of an unstructured kind of research path or more of a structured set of skills that they need to learn and really perfect.
Did either or both of you sort of report or take guidance from only one person at your companies during your internships, or could many people within the company ask you to do things, get you involved in things? Or
Yeah, we're a relatively flexible leadership structure, relatively flat. So while I did have a direct supervisor, I was getting input from a lot of people, and actually being encouraged to go talk to people across the organization, learn from them, and really trying to understand what their jobs were and how I could take what they're doing and apply it to my internship work.
Yeah, it was, 15 people, you are fairly flat. So we're in the same boat. Now, I would say at the time of my internship, there was one individual who had like a very large client load, and so they needed lots of help. So while it was very unstructured, it was kind of random things flying at you at all times. There was one direct person that I was spending a ton of time with. So yeah, at that point in time, there was one direct report, although same thing, you were encouraged to go throughout the organization, but that was the person I was mainly there to kind of help out.
so during your internship, how often did you get feedback from your employer as to how you were doing? Were you happy? Were there things you wished you could have done? Was it daily, weekly, at the end of your internship? What kind of constant feedback, if any, were you getting during your interns?
So we view feedback as an ongoing dialogue. We definitely have sort of more of the normal evaluation type periods and feedback mechanisms, but we really want feedback to be an ongoing basis. So going back to my internship, it was pretty loose. It was on a recurring basis as I was working through problems or asking questions. As we've created different new programs, we've tried to structure it slightly more. So we've created 2 programs based on our internships that I referenced before. One is called our Executive Development Fellowship Program, which is really trying to infuse the organization with talent in research and analytics primarily. The second is our Sales Development Program, which we call our Business Development Professionals, so EDF and BDP. And the BDP program, we have 7 current BDPs from all over the country. A number of them are from the Cleveland area. Some are moving back from college, from other places. And we give them a very structured program where they're exposed to different parts of our sales and marketing organization on a few-week rotation. And at every rotation, they're given feedback on their performance. So it really depends for us on what the role is.
So rotations are important in your business, aren't they?
Exposing people to the critical elements of our business are very important. So
You didn't get my joke.
Oh,
Rotations.
a little slow pitcher.
Jeff?
Tough act to follow, Joe. Yeah, for us, there was, it's less formal. So again, I think just size of business, size of structure, a little bit less formal in terms of the feedback loops, but it was constant. When I started there, every email that you drafted, every presentation or kind of discussion you would provide, there was feedback on it. We have a kind of weekly investment meeting, and so I would present these economic updates, and literally the second I would start, people would start peppering you with questions or would start challenging the way you were presenting information. And so it was less formal in terms of there weren't like marking periods where, hey, you're getting this score out of whatever at this time. I don't think that's what you were referring to, but it wasn't that formal. It was more feedback. And it's just it's a theme for us as a business. I think for every business, it's the same way. Give feedback. If you've got something that needs to be improved or you see something that needs to be improved, say something about it and try and provide some sort of solution to it, not just the critical kind of statement, but what are we going to do about it? And so that was apparent even as an intern. Continues today, I hope. Yeah.
So take a moment. We hear a lot about how millennials are different than some of us used to be. So all of us have sort of a 360 perspective on internships because we were one, we've grown through them, we've used them in our current place of businesses. What do you see as being different between what you can remember in terms of the way you approached an internship or what you expected from an internship versus today's interns? Is there a big difference, or do we make more of it than it truly is?
I'll admit a bias here. I think in general we are all too apt to say things were better way back when, right? And I can use myself as an example. We can bring on a intern now and maybe they're not working as hard, and maybe I say, gosh, when I was an intern, I was staying extra hours, I was gobbling up whatever information I could find. I don't think that's a millennial versus generation whatever type of gap. I think human beings, we all are self-serving, right? We all want to serve ourselves. I think this generation is no different. I think if anything, I would say the generation's a little sharper in terms of being aware of what their value is and what they are bringing to the table. And so I think they probably do ask a couple more challenging questions and maybe are a little bit less likely to just kind of give without getting, or I would say give blindly. But I don't think that's a generation gap. I think that's a knowledge gap. I think they have kind of recognized what value they are bringing to the table. And I think it is up to us to provide work environments where they are challenged. I think this is a bigger kind of philosophical belief. I just think we all want structure. We all want to achieve. We all want to be of value somewhere. We all also often need some direction on how do we do that. And so I just think that burden's there now. It's always been there. I not to say it's not at all on my mind at times that there may be a gap in the generations, but I would rather not believe that that's the case.
So we obviously spend a lot of time trying to understand our fans and trying to understand who are our fans, why do they come to our games, how can we get them to come to our games more, right? As you've seen things progress, at the ballpark in our renovations, we've obviously targeted millennials and young professionals in certain things we're doing. So we have an understanding from a fan perspective. From an employee perspective, I would tend to agree with Jeff. I'm not sure, other than access to information and sort of an expectation of having access to technology and that it's that much different. We're looking to empower people. I think the people we're hiring are looking to be empowered, and I'm not sure that's a generational thing.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've at least noticed with our internships with our interns is that their ability to master technology is way ahead of mine. and their ability to do things faster because of their ability to access and utilize the technology seems, sometimes I find myself having asked somebody working with me to do a certain project and they're done in a third of the time that I thought they would be. And that obviously creates challenges because, again, you want to find yourself keeping them engaged, but they're quick. But they also tend, I've noticed that if you give them a project, the project usually comes back with a lot of different answers from different places that you weren't even expecting them to go, because that's the way they live today. They just have so much more at their fingertips and know how to use it than I know I didn't know. You guys are younger than me, so you're better at that, and you're in this, both of you are in the technology business, you're dependent upon it. But that's one thing I've noticed that, and some of my colleagues have as well, that boy, they got that done in no time, now what do we do? And it's that kind of thing, so you got to be prepared. So
I would just say one thing on that, maybe this is a generational thing, but like synthesis. One of the things that we come upon often inside of our business is, there's more information at our fingertips than ever before. The difficulty is synthesizing that information down to actionable kind of decisions, right? And that is something we do find a little bit of a struggle with our younger people is, hey, I'll throw the kitchen sink at you. I will give you 7,000 references. Here's all the data points. You're like, I didn't ask you to bring back the internet to me. I asked you for an answer to this question. Getting them to synthesize information, I think, that's not a generational thing. I just think that's a learning experience we all have to go through, where we believe the person who I'm reporting to is brighter than me, and I should, give them information and then make the decision, and not recognize that the reason they hired you was to come in there and help them make change, help them drive change inside their business. One of the ways you do that is synthesize information. Give them your judgment. They're hiring you for your judgment. Make sure you're providing that. So I think that is something that's important to remember. Make sure you're asking your interns for their judgment. I think that's something that's important.
You both commented a little bit on this, but I'd like you to go deeper. So we tend to think of internships as an individual gets the internship, they have an aha moment, hopefully they love where they're at, they end up becoming an employee of that company, and that happens. It's happened for some of us, it's happened for some of you. But could you describe sort of some of the indirect benefits, perhaps, where internships maybe didn't result in an immediate job, but maybe 5, 7, 10 years later proved to actually have value to either you or your company or someone else in your industry that gives back to what you're all about?
Boy, I have to think about this a little bit.
Well, he's ready, so if you want him to go. And then
we have numerous examples of that, I think, and I think most people grasp the idea. I mean, if you have an internship somewhere, if nothing else, you get exposure to some business. Again, Dr. Ferguson pointed this out. Like, the exposure is massively important. I mean, just to see what's going on inside of a business. I mean, it seems kind of fundamental, but to recognize that, hey, listen, there is somebody or a group of people or an entire population of employees that are trying to turn a profit. Like, how do we do that? Do we just run, do we just spend as much money as we want, or are we a little bit thoughtful around how we spend dollars? All of those types of decisions inside of a business, you probably have some exposure to through a textbook, et cetera, but if you're not in a business looking at that, you don't have exposure to it. And so I think internships across the board are kind of foundational experiences. For us, there's all kinds of benefits. I mean, we've had other employees that have come as a result of those interns, right? So we had we've had other people get job opportunities through those interns. We had an intern who went to JP Morgan to do analytical work in New York, and somebody else that we had was moving there because of a spouse, and they ended up with a job at JP Morgan. So we've benefited in terms of job placement for people. New clients, new technologies. We had somebody who left and ended up working for a software company. Now we use one of the softwares. I mean, there's kind of boundless, I think, benefits. If you work at that experience with the intern, meaning you're attempting to make that a positive experience for them, I kind of can't imagine how it's not going to be beneficial for your business. Okay. That sounds kind of pie in the sky, but it's really been the experience we've had. Again, we've been doing it for about 15 years now, and our experience has been pretty darn positive. Even with the ones who don't work out, it's been pretty good in redirecting them into other careers that we think, hey, this would be a better fit for you.
So Jeff touched on a lot of good benefits there. Yeah, I think just touching on personal experience, I mentioned internships in college for me. I think each of those was a learning experience and helped me grow in different ways. Even if at the end I realized I didn't really want to be at that company or in that industry moving forward, I still took things that helped me today in what I do. So, for interns that, even if they choose that this isn't the industry I want to be in, this isn't the company I want to be in, the things that they take from that experience is still a positive for them.
So a lot of people out here may not have internships or ever experience. Take 30 seconds if it's a speed date and try to convince them why they should consider hiring some interns at their place.
Well, I think Jeff touched on some of this. Interns for us are the future of our business. So not only do we learn from them, we get better as an organization from bringing in people with different perspectives, different experiences, complementary experiences and perspectives from what we have. So we infuse a different set of views into our organization, which is a positive thing for us as an organization. We also bring in, hopefully in the best scenarios, the future leaders of our organization. So, even if and when it doesn't work out, we learn something from the interns we bring in, and it's extremely beneficial to who we are.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would say cost-effective dating in that 30 seconds. Dr. Ferguson referenced that B, right? So this person was highly effective just in a different way. To hire that person might be a real risk, right? Because they got a long way to go up to that target line. To bring them in as an intern is a lot less risky, and you have a tremendous upside there. Finding some people that may have a little different background, it's diversity into your business, diversity of thought. Bringing that person as an intern is a very low cost, very effective way of getting access to some people you otherwise wouldn't have. I'll use myself as an example. There is 0.0 chance I would be in Cleveland, Ohio today working at the firm I'm in if they hadn't given me an internship in that summer. No chance. And it's not to say I'm special, it's just I would have had a different background from what they would have typically hired. I wouldn't have fit the bill, right? But as an intern, hey, take a flyer and see what happens. Now, I'm not saying I'm tremendously successful, but I will say I'm contributing in my firm. Those are the types of risks I think that are low cost and effective, probably over 30 seconds.
That's okay, great. We have probably time for 2 or 3 questions if we, right there. Hold on, there's a mic coming your way, so.
And this sort of relates to the issue earlier when the young lady from the bank was asking if they could have interns because of the private information. Is that the same in your industry, and why could you have interns with that kind of information and not a bank?
The banks would love to know this. I mean, the regulation facing banks today is amazing. So we have privacy policies that every employee has to sign, right? And that indicates that basically the information of our clients will never leave our firm, right? If the information leaves our firm, we are liable for that breach, and that's our problem. We're bonded, we're insured for that, right? But we don't face the same regulations as banks. Right now, they are extraordinarily regulated. We do take some pretty significant precautions around client information and names, just because you just never know where an intern's going with it, but.
There's one up here.
Yes, what has been your experience with international students who have become interns?
I think it's no different in a lot of ways from domestic students who become interns. I think it depends on their experiences coming in, their passions, what they're looking to do moving forward. So I think we've had some experiences with international students that are positive in the exact same ways that they have been for domestic. I think there's some of the just regulatory challenges as people move forward in terms of visas and things like that, but that's something we deal with as an organization for players and for scouts and for a number of different other roles within our organization.
Yeah, we've actually had a tough time getting international students to take an internship with us. Part of it may be the role, and so it may just be like where we're searching and kind of the role we're looking at. So we've actually offered twice to international students who haven't ended up taking the internship, and so that's been our experience. We haven't had much experience with it. I know from kind of other experiences, the challenges from a post-internship perspective. What does that hiring process look like? What's the longer term kind of regulatory environment? But actually, when I'm told, not that difficult, but it's another set of questions.
Other questions? Over here.
How do you find
So Mylin Vu, who's our head of recruiting, is in the back of the room. She does an amazing job in terms of posting at schools, attending job fairs at schools, scouring, the country for the best students for us. So we go any lengths we can in terms of trying to tap into different sources of students. And we found going on campus to certain places has been helpful. We post on the internet. There are certain job sites, that people within, baseball are following. So, we're not limiting. It's not different from players for us. That if we need to go to Venezuela to find a player and we need to go, somewhere to find a good candidate, we're going to go do it.
It tends to be pretty Ohio, Cleveland-centric. We have kind of through undergraduate institutions, et cetera, we'll cast the net wider than that in terms of who we're touching, but it's typically students who are from here. And so, because it's more like a summer internship or a winter internship, they need to be here at some point. And so they're probably most likely not moving here just for the job in the summer. And so they tend to be here. But a lot of local universities, statewide, and then we have a number of universities we go to outside of here where we know Cleveland students are matriculating at times. And also through even local high schools, like through Ignatius University School, other schools will go and send out, do you have any students at this university that might be interested in it? So we cast that pretty wide. I mean, the goal is, again, is trying to find people that you might not be ready to hire right now, right? For whatever reason, because they got, really, the goal is if you get different thought, that's the goal, and use the intern as an opportunity to get that. So if they've got a different background, they live in a different location, they have different ethnic or religious outstanding. Like, that's who you want to bring in as an intern. Huge opportunities.
Jeff actually raised a good point. Recruiting for us, hiring is not a discrete moment in time. It is not we post a job and then we hire for the job. We are constantly recruiting. Some of the best people we've hired, we've had ongoing conversations with for 3-4 years. It just happens to be the right time for them in their career to come into whatever job we have. So we are constantly looking for talent. And then if the time is right, we have a match.
One of the comments on the international, I've found in our shop, if you're fortunate enough to be able to hire more than a couple interns, I've found that if you have a very diverse group of interns, not only does it benefit you as the employer, but those interns have a blast with each other, learning from each other, that maybe where they come from or where they live or their different experiences. So it works both ways. And you do benefit as the employer, but the interns get an additional experience that maybe they don't often get a chance to have either. So time for one more question if anybody's got one. If not, great. We'll take this chance to catch up a little bit on our time. Again, I know some of us were challenged by that snow coming in, so we can get a little bit back on track by a few minutes. I really want everybody to give a hand to Andrew and Jeff for joining us. And I would just add, since both of these companies are active members of our chamber board, that it keeps working up. Because when you have a culture for helping people in your community, even the leadership of your organizations then are giving back through other organizations constantly. And I think it's a great matrix that works very, very well in our town. So thank you both for being here.